Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. We're going to do the mimer of Ledodi, Vedodi Li from Tufshin Dalad Mem from 40 years ago, as we've said many times. The 40th anniversary of a mimer really gives it extra strength and energy for all of us. The mamorim of Ledodi, Vedodi Li are very inspirational, very famous, for their being based on the analogy that the Alter Rebbe brings in the Torah of the king in the field in Elul. And they've actually been collected recently into one sefer, and it's still being published subsequently, but we'll use the newer outlay of the mimer. Additionally, 40 years ago, when the Rebbe said the mimer, the Rebbe spoke, it was on Parshas Re'eh, which is this past Shabbos Mevorchim Elul. And the Rebbe said that there are usually different mamorim of Elul, and many mamorim from the Rabbeim that begin with the pasuk of Ani Ledodi Vedodi Li. I am to my beloved, and my beloved is to me. Now, sometimes it says, I am to my beloved, and my beloved is to me, Haroya B'Sheshanim, who pastures amongst the roses, or who pastures with roses. And we see that in Likutei Torah too, that the first mimer of Ani Ledodi Li, which stands for Elul, has just that, and then the second one has the addition of Haroya B'Sheshanim. The Rebbe says, just very briefly, that depending on what the focus is, it's a reciprocal relationship between God and the Jewish people. And if we're focusing about the part of the Jewish people, what they're doing to bring it about, that's just the Ani Ledodi, Vedodi Li. Then it's just the first part of the verse. But when it's talking about what God is giving us, it's the second part of the verse. And the Rebbe also then mentioned, before he said the mimer, that there's a mimer from the Rebbe Nishmas Eden, the fifth Rebbe, the Rebbe Rashab, the Rebbe's father, the previous Rebbe's father, which was said in 1897. And here it says, instead of saying Tov Reish Nun Zayin, both in the Maimer and in the introduction, the Rebbe says Nun Zayin Reish Tov, which would be from the term of Nezer, which is a crown, Nizras. And since it was printed exactly 40 years ago, so the Rebbe said, then something new has something very dear. And together with that, it's also the idea of the constant, continuous tadir. So he said a mimer. And then the Rebbe commented additionally, he felt that the date that was written on top of the mimer in that manuscript was incorrect and inaccurate, and that he felt that there might have been a mistake, although he says that the mimer is quite accurate. The way he sees it, you could look in the Farbrengen for further. So let's just go straight to the mimer. And the Rebbe said the mimer. The Rebbe said, if that's the case, the Rebbe says he will repeat the mimer and explain the mimer. In other words, this is the Rebbe's mimer. So let's begin. Ani Ledodi Vedodi Li Haroya B'Sheshanim. I am to my beloved, and my beloved is unto me, who is pasturing with the roses. This is, of course, from the Song of Songs, chapter 6. And the Rebbe Rashab, Rabbi Shalom Dover, when he taught the mimer, he looked at the specifics of this pasuk, and that was in the year of 1897. The Khan Nemer Haroya B'Sheshanim. Here it says who pastures with the roses. Shehu Yisborech Nikra Doidi, that God may be blessed, was referred to here and called my beloved, Roye umefarnes Knesses Yisrael li b'sheshanim. He gives us, he pastures, in other words, provides and sustains the children, the community of Israel, the Jewish people. That's li in the verse. My beloved is unto me, b'sheshanim, with roses. Now we also know that sometimes God refers to us as the one who give him his sustenance, we pasture for God. So the word also roya, which means a shepherd, also has a similar root of reya, which means a friend, or rayosi, which means a spouse. And these are all things that connect and sustain and support. So, like it says in the Medrash and the Chazal, our sages tell us, Israel sustains and gives sustenance to their Father in heaven. So here you have it both ways, both parts of the relationship. And he explains. The Rebbe Rashab explains, the Rebbe is quoting him. Sustenance includes two things, primary things, which are halachically incumbent upon, let's say, a husband who has to provide for the wife. Food and clothing, like we learned in the Gemara, in the Talmud, in the tractate of Ksubas, which is talking about marriage contracts and obligation, of course. Regarding the obligation of the husband to sustain and to provide his wife with food and clothing. And additionally, when we're talking about Jacob thanks God, and he says, he promises to God, he says, when he speaks about the minimum of what he needs, he says bread to eat, and God will give to me bread to eat and clothing to wear. And the Rebbe says, no, this is not a piece of the Maimer, but the Rebbe is adding it to this idea. And therefore, when we support and sustain our Father in heaven, we also have these two aspects. The offerings, the sacrifices, they are called the service of God, and they are the idea of the food. And indeed, God says, when he speaks about the offerings, he says, Korboni, my offering is lachmi, my bread, liishai, for my my fire offerings. Till you take care, that I will take care of my children. Command the children that they take care of me and sustain me. That's the idea of the offerings. The Medrash says that. And actually, Rashi brings it there in the Parsha of Pinchas. Utzdaka hu levush. So the food is the offering, and the charity and the good deeds, the benevolence, is the garment. And like it says, like we say in the davening, which is coming up in the high holidays, levushay tzedakah, his garment is charity. In the part of davening which is called the poetic part, the piyut, Atahu Elokeinu, in the prayers of Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. So one of the things that we say in describing God is we say his cloak is charity, his garment is charity. We can connect this especially with the idea of charity with Elul. Tzedakah is appropriate in Elul. Even though the Rebbe Rashab doesn't speak about this explicitly in the Maimer. And also not in other Memorim with this beginning. Alpi based in Yonim, but the Rebbe says it's connected in two ways. Aleph, number one, because in El we say slichas, like it says in the Code of Jewish Law, in the name of the Gaonim, and the Alter Rebbe brings it in the Maimer L'Kut Torah. Even though it's not the Chabad custom to say the slichas in the whole month of Elul, it happens to be that it is the custom of most of the communities of Sephardic communities to say it in the whole Elul, but nevertheless, the Rebbe explains that that's the idea of slichas, and when we do say slichas, it's also in Elul at the end. The Rebbe doesn't say that here, but that's also obvious. The beginning of when we say the slichas, the prayers for penitence and forgiveness, we say unto you, Lord, is charity. So that's one thing. Elul is the idea of slichas and repentance, and it's connected with charity. V'habeis, in other words, we're charitable, and we ask God to be charitable with us. V'habeis, the hine mavur b'svarim hakdoshim sheyud beis chodshei hashanah keneged yud beis tzuruf Hashem Havaya. It says in the holy books that the 12 months of the year correspond to the 12 combinations that you can have with the name of God. God's name is made up of 4 letters. Now, usually, the Rebbe is going to mention it here too. Let's read it, and then we'll talk about it. In every month, there's one combination. So it's the way you rearrange the letters. There are 12 ways to rearrange the letters. Now, those who are good in math know that there's really 24 ways to rearrange it, but since we have 2 letters that are the same, it has an exception here. And here the Rebbe says it here in the square brackets. Even though in Sefer Yetzirah, which speaks about how the world was created with the letters and the combinations, and of course Tanya quotes this too, not this passage necessarily, but this idea that 4 stones build 24 homes, meaning to say that you can combine them together in 24 different ways, if you have 4 of them, 4 different orders. So indeed, in certain ways, we do look at the fact that the letters of God's name can be rearranged into 24 different orders, right? It's like saying 1, 2, 3, 4. Then you say 1, 2, 4, 3, right? And 1, 3, 2, 4, 1, 3, 4, 2, etc., etc. You can write it out. So you could do that also here. The only thing is, Shiny Hocha, the Rebbe says it's different. Ki Shem Havai Yesh V'Shtei Esis Doimis. That God's name has 2 of the same letter. In other words, similar letters, but it's the same letter. The first Hey of God's name and the last Hey of God's name. Therefore, it's considered, like it says in the Pardes, 12 combinations. So, even though we could write it up because the Hey takes 2 spots, and you could make it over because it's with 4 letters, that's an obvious question. So the Rebbe answers it here. Because they're considered different aspects of Hey, that one is occupied in, let's say, the godly realm, and one is occupied in the realm of creation, and giving the dimension to in both of those spots. So that's why we could have 24, but otherwise it's considered 12. And here's the combination that you have in the month of Elul. Hey, Hey, Vav, Yud. So, from the letters, those are the letters that comprise God's name. And now when you have that combination, Seifet Tei V'Shel HaPasuk Utzdaka Tihya Lanu Ki. Then in this order, these are also the last letter of the words in the verse in V'Eschanan, that we say, God says it'll be charity for us it'll be considered righteous for us that we will keep his statutes, etc. So the last letters of those 4 words are again Hey, Hey, Vav, Yud, Utzdaka, ending in Hey, Tihiyeh ends in Hey. Even though if you're following along here, there's just an apostrophe there representing where the Hey would be, because that would be God's name, so they do it that way. But it's Hey, Hey, Lanu ends with a Vav, Ki ends with a Yud. So charity, it's righteousness for us. So this also connects Elul with the idea of charity. Now, what does this mean? That we sustain and support the supernal realms. We support God through the serving God through Israel, through the people of Israel, and that's considered his food and garment, clothing. You will understand that according to what it says in the Medrash, just like the soul fills the body, so also the Holy One, blessed be He, fills His world. The connection between the body and the soul is the connection between the body of the soul is sustained through food and garments. Shahamazon poil chibur. Oh, just open the door. Shahamazon poil chibur hanashama v'guf bepashtus. If a person eats, then they're able to connect and sustain that the soul is together with the body, and it's a unit that's alive. So food supports the person's life and living, and clothing is protective from too much cold or too much heat, etc. Which, if somebody is too cold, they could, God forbid, freeze to death, and others, their soul will be separated from the body. So it's also a basic necessity. So also, so to speak, in the supernal realms of godliness, through serving the way Israel serves God with food and garments, we give God support. We give God His sustenance through our Torah and our mitzvahs. And again, like we learn in Tanya, that the Torah is called sustenance food, and the mitzvahs are called a garment. So we have both of these aspects, Mefarnes in Yisrael, Avim Shabashamayim, and we sustain, Israel sustains our father, their father in heaven. That there should be a connection of the soul with the Holy One, blessed be He. And so the soul of the world is God, the Holy One, blessed be He. The world is the body, and the connection of that, of God with the world, is through the Torah and mitzvahs that we all perform. So now the Rebbe says we have to. This begs for some additional explanation. Here it goes. It's a verse that we say every day. How great are your actions and your what you have done and what you have made, your creations. You have made them all with wisdom. The creation of the world comes from God's wisdom, and it's drawn down from there. And from there it gets down to the lowest realm of the spheres. So first intellectual, wisdom, understanding, and knowledge, the development, and then it goes into the attributes, the characteristics of the world, till the lowest characteristic, which is in a certain sense the highest, because it starts from there also, Malchus, which is the female sphere, which is, it gets and it pervades, and it develops, Kemaimer, Abba, Yisrael, Barta, and like it says Kabbalistically, and we've had it here in the Mamorim. It says in the Zohar, the father is the foundation of the daughter. V'harei b'sfiras hamalchus, and in the sphere of malchus, the lowest characteristic of royalty, the one that includes all the other characteristics, oilam hadibur, which is the idea of speech, developing and explaining and giving it out and referring. Then we know that God created the world with 10 utterances, so this is the 10 utterances. In order for there to be the connection between God and the world, this wisdom, this point, has to be drawn through into the lowest realm so that it's able to be expressed and create and have what we are through the chain of creation. And according to the explanation that we know on what it says, that you made everything with the wisdom, in relation to God, even wisdom is already like the most physical thing that you could hold in your hand, because even though to us it's abstract, and it's something that you can't, it's not tangible, it's more spiritual, but in relation to what God is, it's quite physical. As explained in Tanya, in the gate of unity and belief, God is so far removed and higher than the level of wisdom. There's no relation. I mean, it's just not relative. Just we can't understand and we can't grasp the chain of the creation, how it goes from level to level, from the level of Chachma, which is such a lofty level, to the level of actual creation, deed, and action, physical world. How did God create wisdom? So there has to be something that makes that too. That was the idea of God's pleasure, which was the impetus to have the wisdom to create. Just like the person on this world, if you have pleasure from something, so therefore that makes you then use whatever attributes you have to make yourself have that pleasure. That's how it is with God. So then God, through the pleasure that he gets through the service of the souls of Israel, that draws down his essence to come into this wisdom to make the world, because he did it for the pleasure that he gets from what we do. From there it goes into the level of Malchus, and from there it goes into the whole realm of creation, through the whole chain of creation. And more than that we are called the spouse and the supporter of God. God says they are my spouse and my supporter. They support their Father in heaven. We said this in the previous Maamar that we learned also, that in generally speaking, and also the Mamorim here, and this whole cluster of Mamorim has this theme, that the service of the Torah mitzvahs that we have increase God's energy, so to speak, in the supernal realm. Like it says in the verse, that these are the mitzvahs that the person does and they will live by it, and they have to. This also tells us that we have to keep Torah in a way that sustains life and not to die. So there's certain things that if it would be a cause of death, heaven forbid, then we wouldn't do it. But there's also an explanation from this verse. It says the word oisam here without a vav. It says atem. It says if you make God. So this is a different word, actually, a separate word. But that through fulfilling the mitzvahs, the person brings life into the mitzvahs. The Maggid explains that. Similarly in Torah, like it says in the Medrash, that whoever studies Torah, God faces them, and others is with them, and studies with them. So that means that the person who's studying Torah affects that there should be a connection between the Torah and the Holy One, blessed be He, and he gets involved, and he's studying with the person. And this increases life in the Torah. That God should be reading and studying the Torah in a way that would be even higher than how he would be studying Torah on his own. Because we affect that when we study Torah, he comes there. If we wouldn't be, he wouldn't be doing that. So there's an increase here. As a matter of fact, the Gemara says, when it talks about God's schedule, what does God do? It says, it's a Gemara in Avodah Zarah, the first 3 hours, Kuvdalet, the first 3 hours of the day, he sits and he occupies himself with Torah study. And more than that, not just that the children of Israel add and increase life in the Torah mitzvahs, more than that, they support and sustain their Father in heaven, so to speak. And like it says in the Medrash, that Israel adds and increases energy and power in the supernal strength. We read this also brought recently that Moshe Rabbeinu told God, and now get a grip, God, you handle it, and he evoked that God should take strength. So, like it says in the verse in Shlach, and now may the strength of the Almighty be greater. And like the Seir explains, this is the word that I was referring to earlier, that you will do the mitzvahs. There it says atem, it says oisam without a vav, so that could be read atem, which means you. It means like, and you will make me, not just you will do them, but you will make. So it's as if God is considering that we make him, so to speak, because we make him happy through the mitzvahs that we do, etc. This was all when everything was all hunky-dory and all was well. When everything was proper, when the temple was standing and our service to God was complete, and like it says again in the Song of Songs, open up for me, my sister, my beloved, when we are in the level of a sister to God, so to speak, they are the spouse, the supporter. But there's times when things are not like they should be, they're not so hunky-dory. And in the months of the year, this is stressed and focused on. In the month of Elul, primarily, it's a month of reckoning and accounting. When we make a true reckoning, according to what we're really up to, according to each and every person, according to their soul, according to what they really mean in their own life, and it's true and it's accurate and it's authentic. When you come to the you figure out that there's still a lot yet to be done, and that is you come to that. That's the ultimate calculation here. That you come out with the fact that there's plenty more to do to make one's service complete. That's the result of this account. And not just that to make it complete, full, but to fill up the things that are missing. Then you need special awakening and strength given from above. That means that God sustains us with the roses. Just like a rose has 13 petals, the koi al ha'oras yud gimel midas harachim shebechedesh el, that is a reference to the 13 attributes of mercy that are shining in the month of Elul. And here the Rebbe will discuss this a little further. So to understand this shine, this radiance of the 13 attributes of mercy which go on in the month of Elul, Alter Rebbe explains in the Torah of our Parsha, meaning Parsha A, that we read this past Shabbos, we'll understand this according to the parable of the king in the field, and as the Rebbe will explain subsequently. The Rebbe says that we could say, like Menachem says, you could take it to the bank. Why does the Alter Rebbe bring this parable in that mimer, that it's explaining that it's the merciful month of God? To show us that the most lofty idea and part of the radiance of the 13 attributes of mercy of the month of Elul, spiegelt sich up, it actually is mirrored here in actuality, in this physical world, this world. So this is, in other words, the loftiest part of the mercy is right here, and we can relate to it. To the extent that, in here the Rebbe is saying something very interesting here, and it was pertinent then, and of course 40 years later it's pertinent right now, that it mirrors itself also with the kings in the world, of the nations of the world, the leaders of the nations of the world. In the simplest fashion, this parable is not just about kings that came from the king in the field is about a king that is from the kings of the house of David. Or from the other kings, the Jewish kings of Israel. The parable works for even a king from the nations of the world. He also goes to the field. In other words, this parable, then the Rebbe says, is in a physical sense, and it's actually effective in everything. Shleimar, take this to the bank too. Indeed, it's only with the king of Israel in its truest fashion, and that which this idea is also in the kings of the world, so that there should be the possibility of freedom of choice, and you could choose life. And that there was an awakening in these days about this whole idea of the various tasks of all humanity on earth, which all are created in God's image, and all are descendants of Adam, and everybody has a part in this world. And then, but Yisrael, who was the Am HaNivchar, was chosen to do certain things that others, and that's helpful for everybody. But that's a discussion for another time. The parable is that the king, before he comes to the city, the people of the city go out to greet him, and they receive him in the field. Then anybody who wants to receive him, whom he can go, and he then receives everybody. The king receives everyone with a happy countenance and in a good mood. And he smiles. The king smiles to everybody. That which the people of the city, they go out to greet the king in the field. It's not just in the field. They become people of the field. There are people that are more occupied with the field. Like the Talmud says, that a person, his primary aspect is to work the earth, to plow, to plant, to reap. This is also a parable for everything that he does, since a person has to serve God, and their business has to be in an upright fashion. So that is whatever the person does in the field is done properly. Then you have to then get involved in the nitty gritty as is appropriate for that. Therefore, the clothing that a person wears is appropriate for being a person of the field. Meaning to say that you're involved in the world means you're really involved in the world, but in a proper way to elevate the world. While spiritually, but again, the garments of the soul, which are the thought, speech, and deed of how the soul expresses itself, that they should be Torah thoughts and Torah speech and Torah deeds. Shouldn't just be like a field person. I'm sorry, not just the speech and the deed should be like a person of the field. Even the thought, the garment of thought. The deed and speech of a person without any thought is not a human way of speech. That could be like a primate. Just in general, like an ape, it's not something that was thought out with an intellectual process, just a deed. But a person has intellect, and that has to be what is influencing their thought and their deed and their speech. So a primate just does what they want, but a person, it's by mere definition of being human, is that their thought is enclosed in their speech and their deeds. This is what this parable wants to tell us. People of the field who are dressed in field clothing, they can also greet the king. In other words, the people of the city go and become field people, and the field people are field people. The king smiles to them and shows them a cheerful countenance, and he accepts their requests, etc. And that's how it is also in what the parable is describing. That the radiance of the 13 attributes of mercy of the month of Elul is also for somebody who is in a level of being a field person. And his clothing are clothing of the field. Clothing of the field sometimes are muddy. And he could also receive the countenance from God. Then the Alter Rebbe continues in the rest of the parable. When he goes into the city, when the king goes into the city, the people follow him. The Rebbe says you could also take this to the bank. This also explains why the 13 attributes of mercy in the month of Elul, then God is sustaining us and pasturing us with the community of Israel with roses. Then we reciprocate and we go up to the level that we sustain our Father in heaven. Why? Because in the beginning they were people of the field. But then afterwards they follow him to the city of where the capital is, where his kingdom is, where his palace is. Not just to the outer chambers and to the chambers, but the whole city. So not just into his inner chamber, but to the whole city. Everyone is invited in to the royal city. They increase the glory of the kingdom because it's so full of so many people, all types of people, and such a potpourri of people. There's no such thing as a king doesn't have a nation. And then the word for nation means also weak people, like coals that are already weakening, but they're also part of it. And through them, they are what crown him to be the king. They're the ones who coronate him. The Berevam Dafka Hadas Melech. With the many people, that is particularly and specifically the glory of the king. So many people, they increase the glory in the kingdom and the monarchy of the king himself. This is after the radiance of the 13 attributes of mercy of the month of Elul. This is the idea of he pastures us with the roses. Then we go up to be the level of God's mate, God's spouse, God's sustainer. To support and sustain our Father in heaven. And this is so now the Rebbe says regarding the service of Israel in the month of Elul, through drawing down the 13 attributes of mercy. It's written, Ani Ledodi, I am to my beloved, right? That's our relationship with God. We are in a situation, we are in an effort and in a position, in a motion of we are to our beloved. We turn and we return to the Holy One, blessed be He. Since this happens through the drawing down the 13 attributes of mercy that were in the supernal realm, coming to us and they're radiating. They were limited, but when it comes down here, then God releases that energy, and therefore we can do things that are even higher than our regular potentials. That means repentance and return to God can be in one moment. Like turn with one turn. You can just turn it around just in a moment. So even just for one turn, it's not just for regarding God. That's not just enough. You have to just, once you make that decision, then you have to bring it down and become a better person. You have to bring it down into your vessel, so to speak. In other words, to bring it into sustainability, into continuity. That's what our sages say on the verse that he shepherds us, he pastures with the roses. The word Sheshanim, which means roses, can also mean, if you switch around where the vav is, you switch the vav to between the two shins, after the second shin, it says Sheshanim, that they're studying halacha. That is a reference to studying and occupying oneself with the halacha, the laws and the rules of Torah. The halacha of Torah, Shazeo Gama Shatayra Yesh Shabbatayra Yesh Gid Gil Midas Shatayra Niresh Behem, and now the Rebbe brings out that the 13 attributes of mercy correspond to the 13 attributes, the 13 rules upon which the Torah is expounded. We say that every morning in the davening, right before Hoidu, and at the end of the preliminary part of the davening, and they correspond to each other. Kishem Sheshana Yesh Batleisar Alan, just like a rose has the 13 petals. So also the Torah has the 13 ways to expound. And this also from this we understand also that the tshuva that is done in Elul is connected to the Torah study. That the days of the month of Elul is 40 Hey Mem Yoim Achronim Shebahem Kibul Moshe Luchas Achronis. So we know that Elul is connected to Torah study because the days of the month of Elul are the Moshe Rabbeinu was on the mountain 3 times. The final 3 times that he was there was he went up Erev Rosh Chodesh Elul. He was there for Elul, and then he was there for the 10 days of Tishrei. Yom Kippur was his final day there. He came down after Yom Kippur. So, Mem Yoim Achronim Shebehem Kibul Moshe Lochos Achronis Moses got Moshe Rabbeinu got the final the second set of tablets with the 10 Commandments. Shebehem Moshe Moshe B'Limud Torah, and then Moshe was also occupied himself with the Torah study. What's this to the first 40 days and the last 40 days? And by the way, he was there 40 days in the middle too. There's a difference between the first set of tablets that ultimately were broken and the final and the second set of tablets which stays forever. That's a little bit like the difference between the way that tzaddikim, the all righteous, serve God, and the way the Baal Tshuva, who has to rectify things. So the first was the commandments from God. Then the middle 40 days, of course, Moshe was gaining their forgiveness. And the final 40 days was the Torah, the way we will be able to grow even with our idiosyncrasies and our deficiencies, etc., etc. Well, the Hoyer, the Rebbe says, we can also point out, Shakol and Yonam Shabelam, Shoshim Meha Torah. Everything in the world is rooted in the Torah K'maimer, like it says in the Zohar, God ultimately, the Holy One, blessed be He, looks in the Torah and creates the world. It's a continuous creation. Every moment God continuously creates. Like the Baal Shem Tov explains, like the Alter Rebbe brings in Tanya, the letters in the 10 utterances of Torah, which are connected to the 10 commandments. So the 10 utterances created the world. They're created to the 10 commandments, which are the mitzvahs. And like the Chazal explained, it says each spoon weighed 10. When the princes made the offering and the donation upon the dedication of the sanctuary in the desert, so each spoon, the golden spoon, was 10 copper. It says it twice, asara, asara. So that's a reference to the 10 utterances with which God created the world, and the 10 commandments with which He sustained the worlds, which are interchangeable because the world is made to be sustained with the Torah study, and God looks in the Torah to create the world. They come together. So that, therefore, this was the spoon that brought the incense, that's the pleasure, that is all connected, as the Zohar explains. So, Heim HaMachayim HaMahavim Kol Davar Shebe'elam B'chol Rega V'Rega. So these utterances give sustenance and life to everything in the world, every single moment. Therefore, to draw down these attributes of mercy in El, that's connected also with learning Torah and the laws of Torah, so which also have the 13 attributes with which Torah is expounded. Therefore, in El, you have to increase in both these aspects of Torah and prayer. People who study Torah the whole year has to focus more in these days and occupy themselves more with prayer, like it says in the later authorities and the Achronim, and Keneged Beis and Yonim Shebechodesh Elul. So the Torah and increase and the prayer increase is to correspond to these two primary things that we have in the month of Elul, Ha'alef Inyan Haroy B'Sheshanim, the idea that God pastures us with the roses. That's the radiance of the 13 attributes of mercy. That's connected with prayer and asking for mercy, etc. The second thing is the Torah, that the roses are also called Sheshoin. They study Torah, that's also the roses. So that's both. And again, like we mentioned earlier, the 13 attributes with which Torah is expounded. From the word of God, which is halacha, the law of Torah. We'll come to the next thing, which it also says the word of God is the Kates, which means the end of time, the time for Mashiach to come. The Gemara says it in one Psak HaHalacha Rambam, and like the Rambam rules, and the ruling of the halacha, which is in the Rambam. Israel does tshuva, and immediately they are redeemed. So Moshe Rabbeinu was the first Redeemer, the final Redeemer. But the Rebbe also mentioned this in the Farbrengen subsequently, this idea of Dvar Havaya, Zu Halacha, Zu Haketz, and it's also, then it was 40 years since the passing of the Rebbe's father, now it's 80 years since the passing of the Rebbe's father, and the Rebbe was saying that Mem is connected, the idea of 40 is connected with, he connected it in several places there of these ideas, and he connected also with this idea of Moshe and Moshiach is the Goel Rishon, Goel Achron. They're also both, their names start with Mem, Moshe and Moshiach. So Moshe Goel Rishon, Goel Achron. That's from the Zohar and from the Medrash. V'neilach l'beis hamikdash hashlishi, you can go to the third Beis Hamikdash. The chesiv bei b'yom hashlishi kimenu v'nichil lefonav. Regarding the third Beis Hamikdash, it says, "It will sustain us, and we will live before God then in the greatest way of life, in the way it will be when Mashiach comes." In our days, actually. So, kishaneilach l'eretz hakodesh, will go to the Holy Land. U'Yerushalayim in HaKodesh, to Jerusalem, the holy city. Kiryas Melech Rov, the great abode and city of the great king. L'Harabayis, in the temple mountain, Har Beis Hashem, like it says in the verse in Isaiah, the mountain of the house of God. L'Beis HaMikdash, to the house of the holiness, the holy temple. Mikdash Adonai Keinu Yadecha, the sanctuary of God, the holy house, which is formed by your hands, God's hand. Nowadays, actually so, with happiness and gladness of heart. Thank you, L'chaim.